It's good to see each and every one today. As I said last Sunday, or whenever it was I was up here, the Lord has really blessed me and been with me through my surgery and my healing process. And I just want to thank Him for all of that. My lesson is titled Miracles from Obedience. My scripture is going to be from Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. A very familiar story. I can't take all of the credit for this lesson. No, I didn't, what do they call that? Plagiarize? I didn't copy without permission. So, I hope it touches you like it did me when I read it. Matthew chapter 14, I'll start with verse 22. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. And then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. The miracle began in the darkness of night, before it ended in the light of day. Are you a night or a day fisherman? Why does it matter? It did in the Sea of Galilee and for Peter. Now, as I read this, put yourself in that place. We know how Peter was, but as I said, when I read, put yourself in that place, pertaining to yourself, pertaining to the church, and your walk with God. Perhaps it does for you too. The story in the Bible of Simon Peter being called to fish for more than he ever imagined holds such deep meaning on so many levels. Fishing at night was the norm in the Sea of Galilee because the fish were unable to see the nets being cast as they swam in the shallow waters while feeding, and so they were easier to capture. Ironic, but there were no fish in the shallow end that night. Now, how ironic was that? You know, when God's in the presence. Because they too have been called to the deep, as they also awaited their part in the miracle. You see, the norm, the minimal expectation, and the power of his might doesn't work where the miraculous lies. Staying safe and close to the shore at night allows us to capture only what our boat, nets, and crew can handle. You know, we don't like to go out in the deep. Let's just stay in the shallow. Let's just barely get our feet wet. But what if God wants more for you and from you. So he calls to you to do the opposite of the norm, trusting only his voice and direction. Peter knew who Jesus was because Jesus had been in Peter's home for dinner before and had even healed his mother-in-law. But today, Peter would follow Jesus to his dinner table, and that changed everything. You know, if we follow Jesus, it will change everything. How many times have we invited Jesus into our lives and witnessed others' miracles, but never trusted him enough to follow him to where our miracles lie? You know, isn't it easier to pray for other people than it is to pray for yourself? And I don't know why that is.
You feel guilty, I guess. I feel guilty when I ask for anything from the Lord.
While being exhausted from a night of toiling with cast after cast, and nothing to show for it, Peter and his crew came ashore at dawn and were washing and repairing their nets in normal fashion. Plans to lay them in the sun to dry by day so they could do it all again tonight in hopes the outcome would be different. But today would be the day that the sun, S-O-N, shone and prepared their nets for the catch of a lifetime. Today things would be different. Not tonight. Right smack dab in the light of day. That's my Jesus. When he is ready to do wonders for you, it matters not the time or season. When he passes by and calls you out, don't delay. You know, if you delay, you might miss your time. You might miss your opportunity if you delay when Jesus calls you. They were tired and weary in their toiling too, but in obedience they gathered up the nets they had surrendered for the day and climbed back in the boat and pushed out once more. It all started with surrender. Surrender to his call to not only hear his voice, but in obedience follow it. Even if it calls to push out once more and go where logic has no option but to depend on blind faith. Now, isn't that the way we are? God calls us out and you say, well, Lord, I can't see the end and I can't see what's going to happen, so I'm just going to stay right where I'm at. Isn't that the way we are? They figured since the normal behavior of the fish at night was to come into more shallow water to feed on the little fish that lived in the shallow end, that this was not going to be a fruitful effort at this time of day because the big fish had retreated back into deep water. Sure enough, Jesus said, go farther into the deep water. How deep? As far and deep as his voice says go. Only obedience will position you for what he has prepared for you. Push out and don't stop until he says so. Surely the sunlight will expose the nets as they are cast and the fish will scatter. Again, they're expecting nothing because this is not how it's done in the fish dome. Because here in these waters of familiarity, they thought they were king. They thought because they knew it all, you know, how they were supposed to fish, that Jesus didn't know what he's talking about. As professional fishermen, they thought they knew more about fish than the one who created them, the King of Kings. This is indeed kingdom works. How often do we think we know more of what works for us than the one who created us? That's the way we are. So how deep are you willing to go? How many more times can you push out and cast with hesitant hope at best? How far and how deep will you go for your life-changing miracle? Let's keep pushing till he says far enough. Could you be on top of your miracle with your next cast of faith and obedience? You know, sometimes we are and we give up too soon. It's right there within reach. And because we can't see it, we just give up. I hear the fish being summoned by the mighty and merciful Lord. Your lack may be your miraculous catch tomorrow. What is waiting for your deep obedience to his call? So let's think back to the offshore preaching event. Jesus called out to Peter from the shore. It was his intent to borrow his boat to preach from. Because if you remember, there was a crowd following Jesus, and on the same level they couldn't all hear him preach. They could not. Now Jesus was quite aware of Peter's hardships at the moment due to fishing all night with countless casting that yielded nothing but disappointment, fatigue, hunger, and unpaid bills. And don't that sound like us having hardships? You know, we toil all week, we fight people and spirits out here in this world. And we had, sometimes we've had unpaid bills because there's just not enough there. But there was a crowd with Jesus wanting and also in need of an encounter of miraculous proportions. But aren't we all? The only way for Jesus to preach for all to hear was from being out in the water, which amplified his voice. And we see again that Peter possessed the tools Jesus needed. So all the surrounding crowd could hear his call to them also. I'm sure it was Peter's least desire at the moment to board Jesus in the boat and then keep the boat afloat at just the right place where the sound waves would carry his voice clearly to the people on shore. Have you ever been there? Jesus asks you to do something, you say, "Oh, I can't do it right now, Lord." So tired and frustrated with your own needs that Jesus calls you to serve others' needs. He calls you to use the gifts and talents and tools that he equipped you with and use them for his voice to be heard by others in their current needs. More times than we care to recall or ashamed to admit, why would we ever begrudge someone else of being blessed? You know, we might be in the molly grubs and the Lord asks us to do something. We say, "Oh, I can't do it right now, Lord. I can't pray right now. I can't witness to that person right now." But God always equips us. So the task was completed and the message from Jesus was delivered clearly, and truth be told, Peter was no better off for his efforts with assisting the request of Jesus. And there again, that's the way we are. We'll do it. We'll come to church anyway, but we sit here begrudgingly, thinking about what else I could be doing. But Jesus knew what Peter had need of, and he honored that because Peter was faithful even in his weariness. He knew Jesus and his healing and saving powers, and knew others needed it too. Sometimes it's that cup of cold water offered amidst our own thirst that has the greatest impact. So Jesus, seeing Peter's need, puts the story in motion that changed Peter forevermore. Jesus asked Peter to trust him enough to try one more attempt in the most ridiculous of circumstances known to fishing. In Peter's mind, he knew what Jesus was capable of. He had miraculously and instantaneously healed Peter's mother-in-law. But Peter's flesh was tired and he was beyond done. Ever been there? Yet his need was still real and raw. What if? Why not? Could he? Would he? For me? I'm sure Peter's inner voice screamed all these same questions that our tired flesh asks at the point of our desperate needs. So how many times have we sat and asked him questions when God asks us to do something? God, why are you asking me to do this? God, right now? Why right now? You know, that's the way we are. So Peter does what we do and musters his last ounce of strength and faith and climbs back in the boat with a faithful crew. And in obedience, Peter pushed out into the deep waters at Jesus' command. Just how deep is deep? Until the master of the seas says stop. And one more time, the nets were cast in complete opposition of what knowledge and training and experience was proven is best. But it didn't work last night. So we will do it your way, Lord. Again, a testament to our surrender to his sovereignty. You know, he finally gave in. Look what all he had to go through, but look what all we have to go through, but we finally give in. At Jesus' command, we cast and let go of our net. He directs where it goes and how the fish align. Again, we need to realize in our weariness, the casting is our obligation of obedience. Everything else is in his hands. So today, in your weariness, frustration, and desperation, what are you in need of casting onto the sea of his sovereignty? What is it that you think Jesus is asking of you that sounds utterly ridiculous and against your better judgment? What is requiring your last ounce of strength and faith? What are you willing to risk in obedience to what he is asking of you? What questions are being screamed in your spirit that make you doubt, fear, and forget what you've seen him do for others, but find hard to believe he will do it for you? Lord, and load it all in your boat and push out into the deep until he says that's far enough. Now cast on the other side of your wheel. Trust and obey. So here we are. It all comes down to this. Will he or won't he? And how many times have we asked that? Will Jesus do it or won't he won't do it? Lord, I'm standing here trusting you. Are you going to do it or not? Have we wasted our time on service to the kingdom and acted in blind faith to go home as empty-handed as we came? You know the drill. The enemy of our souls initiates when we are struggling to believe the unseen promises of God. And won't the devil hit you when you're down? He knows when you're down, when you're struggling, and that's when he likes to come at you with both barrels. So one last command from Jesus. Cast your nets on the other side. And we want to sit and say, really? I've tried this and I've tried this. So really? One more time? But since none of this makes sense anyway, why not? Been there 1,000 times. Full well knowing that my known efforts haven't worked and our phone a friend option and multiple choice options have failed. So let's go with the only option left, Jesus. Peter was so weary and exhausted at this point that he just wanted someone else to make a plan and let them take the fall for it if it failed. He was fresh out of options. Let's be honest. That's often our last-ditch effort too. You know, we try everything and then we just finally just surrender it all to him and say, okay, God, here it is. Do what you can with it. If it fails, then it's on you and not me. We've come all the way out here, so let's just do it your way and see. I've got nothing more to lose. We really don't know Peter's train of thought in this moment, but it was pretty much as was described. You know, Peter is human just like we are. So we have them thoughts. I'm sure Peter had them as well. Like our thoughts often being in these 11th hour moments of desperation, Jesus still came through. Jesus won't withhold because we struggle with moments of doubt and weariness. He had already called Peter and ordained this miracle for such a time as this. I love that phrase right there. What Jesus anointed in Peter on the shore was not negated because Peter may have doubted. Peter still obeyed even in his state of weariness. With trembling lip and shaky legs, we also choose to show up on the battlefield of faith every day, and in that act of obedience, God anoints what is surrendered before him. Like I said, we all get weary and torn apart and stuff, but yet we still show up. And God will honor that. You know, you might not feel like coming to church and sitting here because of everything that's going on in your head, but God will honor that. So when you're sitting in your boat of indecision, and your default has always been self-sufficiency, but you've been called to go deeper, it's then your spirit will say, cast to the other side of your will and release your miracle. Just do it. And that's what Peter did. The moment he let go of the net, let go of his will, he released the ability for God to show up and out as never seen before. That's just like Jesus saying it. When we give up and get ourselves out of the way, he'll show up. Their nets began to break at the weight of the abundance of fish God had summoned to this side for just this moment. So much so that their boats and crews in the vicinity of them had to come to their aid to help with the haul. Let's say right here that your crew matters. Not everyone can attend your calling. Not everyone can be lavished with your oil. The oil from your crushing is deep and personal. And your appointment to go deeper requires an alignment with those that share the same vision. You know, so some people that we want to keep close to us might not belong close to us. You can't come along for the ride if you're not willing and able to go as far and as deep as the leading of God's voice. Because when your miracle is released, they benefit also. So just think, some of these people want to be close to you. Do you want them to benefit from your miracle? Their witness to your obedience then becomes their testimony too. So align your crew with the level of deepness you desire, because the retrieval of the miraculous blessing will require as much action on their part as it does on yours. See, a lot of people want the miracle, they don't want to work for it. They want to, what is it? The cup's running over into the saucer. They just want to get the little bit that's left in the saucer. Well, to me, that gets cold. We ain't turning this boat around empty-handed. Now, when I read back over it, I thought of the church. Instead of the boat, I put the church right there. We ain't turning this church around empty-handed because someone decided it was getting too deep. If you want out at this point, you'll have to jump ship. We're not turning this church around. You'll have to jump ship and swim back to shore. Team Jesus, going all in. You all in or nothing. So be discerning who rides in your boat. There's a lot of people willing and waiting to partake of your blessing on shore while doubting and maybe secretly hoping you'll not succeed. Discernment is a gift well worth honoring, and you're wise to seek the Holy Spirit in all things. Preferably, before you cast your net of faith, direction of the cast matters, because he has already aligned the fish in the exact spot of his will. See, God's already got the people lined up out here that needs to go here. We just got to go get them. Obedience in every step is key. You can arrive in the vicinity of His will, but casting the sovereignty of His will determines the size of your catch. I want all God's got for me. I want all God's got for this church. God was just getting started with Peter. He has so much more in store for him. Peter needed to be desperate and weary in his own doings in order to let go and let Jesus be his true reward. Then Jesus was able to bestow his ultimate calling on Peter and make him a fisher of men. The bigger blessing here requires even bigger sacrifices from Peter. He had to walk away from his biggest catch and forsake all for his call. How desperate are you to follow Jesus? What miracle will it take and then be forsaken for you to allow your testimony to transcend? To transcend generations, and your greatest reward be for the love of Jesus and not for what he fills your net with. The ripple effect of Peter's obedience is still in motion today. Jesus still calls to us, and he still takes us out in the deep to release our biggest fears by casting all our cares on him. We still receive his mercy and grace even when we grow weary in well-doing. It's in the moving out into the deep sea of the unknown that activates the miracles. So we've just got to trust God. If it looks silly, if it looks ridiculous, if it looks crazy, whatever, we've got to trust God to get our miracle for ourselves, for our church, for this community, for the fellowship, for whatever. We've got to trust God. So I hope that speaks to you like it did me. I know it was a lot. Anybody else have any comments?
I know, it's a short comment, but in the movie King of Kings, it talks the Bible from the beginning to the end, showing it in the story of Jesus, but in the eyes of a child, because it was dad telling the story. He was in the whole story. But it focused a lot about Peter, especially what you were saying about the fish, and in the storm, and then how they wasn't catching any fish, and then how they was reacting and laughing and all that stuff when they had the abundance of fish and they couldn't get the fish up on the boat and all that, and how hard it was for Peter to trust in God, but when he did, and that was the blessing that God did, but how hard it was for him to trust in God.
Like I said, it's hard for all of us to trust in God because we can't see the end of it. We can't see the big picture, so it's hard to trust him. Anybody?
Follow Jesus, he'll get you out of your comfort zone.
Yes, he will.
A lot of times me, I like to be in control of whatever situation that's gonna affect me, you know? And if we're not in control, you know, it's hard to let go. And, you know, we have to let go and let God do what he's gonna do. And we have to step out there by faith and do what he asks us to do. And like I said, he'll get us out of our comfort zone.
Yes, he will.